Hi, welcome to this CodeRage 7 session about FireMonkey with style. My name is Marco Cantu. I'm the author of a number of Delphi books, from the Mastering Delphi series to the recent Delphi handbooks. And you can find more information about my books on my website, marcocantu.com. You can also find more up-to-date information on my blog or by following my Twitter account. So what we're going to cover in this session is styles in the FireMonkey library. Styles are not just graphical feature of the library, it's the most relevant foundation element and the most distinctive element of the library compared to, well, most other libraries out there, including, of course, the VCL, which is based on a completely different architecture. We'll have a look at the controls hierarchy, just mention shortly writing custom controls, which is related with styles, but we'll try again to focus specifically on styles and on the new and the change to styles in the new version of FireMonkey, FireMonkey 2, specifically the difference in pixel perfect styles and style overrides through local properties. So what is a style? It's very hard to provide a clear definition. They are certainly very different from styles in the VCL, which have a purely graphical representation. Styles in FireMonkey are more or less like cascading style sheets in HTML because they provide substructure. They provide the internal architecture and also behavior of a given control. So by changing the style, you can really affect in a very significant way the structure of the control and its behavior. Styles are the foundation of the FireMonkey controls library. Now, FireMonkey has other areas, pure graphic, 3D, but if we look at the controls library, the foundation is really styles, and also style are extremely relevant in making the library cross-platform because you can, again, by adapting the style to the control, you can really change the look and feel and the behavior of a control significantly without having to change the source code or any of the structure of the application, just by adapting the application to a different style. There are many ready-to-use global styles, and that's where we'll start inspecting styles, but that's not the most or the only relevant feature. Again, styles define the internal structure, not just the external look. But again, that's a good starting point. A global style determines the look and feel of the application overall, and you can assign a style book to a form and then use the stylebook component to change the global style. You can do that at design time, you can do that programmatically at runtime, and make your application look native to a given platform. Now, there are default styles that are applied automatically, so even if you don't pick a style within a style book, your application will have a specific style for the platform it is compiled for, so either Windows 7, Mac OS, or iOS. So let me start showing you this example that will guide us throughout most of the session. One of the features is the ability to use the load button to change the overall style. Now, there is already a style loaded in the style book. So if we double click on this component, we can see that there is a style that has already been loaded. But we can replace that style with a custom one at design time by pressing load, or at runtime by some rather simple source code like this. We can just use an open dialog, grab the file name for the style, and assign it to the file name property of the style book. So let's see what happens when we run this program. go for load style, pick one of the available style, let's go for golden graphite, and apply it. So we now have a completely different look and feel for our application, and we can change it further to a blend style, to air style, or transparent style, or anything else that you have available. Okay, so that's one way to look to styles, which is certainly relevant, but we really want to focus a bit more on the internals of how styles work and what's their actual behavior. Now, each control has a style. There is a property that refers to the control style, but you can change the style of an individual control. Okay, so let's start with this example here, and actually you can see here that I've already customized at design time the style for this button. How do you do that? Well, the way to do it is to go for Edit Custom Style. Edit Custom Style will create an individual style for the given control, and that style is this one, Custom Style Style 1, and you can see it in effect. But we can use it as an excuse to look into what's the structure of a button. So a button is a layout, it's a graphical container with a background rectangle, and there are some animations, there's a glow effect, and then there is text. And text is the text of the button, and in this case I've picked a yellow color. And well, good, you can customize and change some of the other features. Again, notice how the style is made of multiple sub-elements, effects, animations, and graphical objects like rectangle or text elements, and how you can at design time go change some of these features, like for example the button text color. Okay, now that we have defined this style, what we can do is go pick the style for our control, and this is automatic because that's when we defined it, but also go paste this style in the style lookup property of any other control to change the behavior. If we do not provide any style, or say that the style is button style, which is the default style for a button, then we get the standard behavior. If we pick a specific style, then that style is applied for the control. Okay, so this is what I've done here. And of course we can do the same operation, change the style at runtime, sorry about that. And what we can do, we can simply change the style at runtime. So let's run this as well and see what happens when I press change style. The control gets back to the standard structure or the custom one. Now there's another thing we can do, which is go and change the individual color, text color of a given control. Okay, so this is done for a few controls, but one, for example, is this code that grabs the button change style object, and as we've seen, there is a sub object that has the text, so we can look for it. We can look for the text sub element of the style for this button control, cast to the text, t-text type, and go change the color to red. Okay, so if we run this, we're going to change the color for this label, and we're going to change the color for the this button. Okay? Now, this was the situation in Delphi XE2, but here, as you can see, there is actually a significant difference. If we want to change the color of the label differently from the button that has no color, button text color property, the label has a font color, which is apparently ignored because the label is gray, it's not brown. If we pick a value, that value is enforced, and this becomes the label's color, which means that the label will, from now on, ignore the style. This is generally not optimal because the color of the label won't adapt to the different styles. It will remain kind of out of place when you change these to different elements and different colors. It's generally better to leave the label tied to the style so that when you have a dark background, you get a white text, and the opposite, when you have a white background, you'll have a dark text. But now that we have selected one, how do we set it back? Now there is a new property in XE3, which is the style settings. Which of the values come from the style and which of the values come from the control properties. If we set back the font color to a style property, then we get the color from the style, and as we dynamically change the style, we'll get the right color for the control. Again, this is a new feature in XE3 that provides more flexibility and easier customization of individual controls, but by slightly defecting from the overall model of using styles. Okay. There is some code also behind this event handler. What this does, it goes through all of the elements of the style book, all of the components in the style book, and change some of their features, and then updates some of the UI controls based on that modified style. So we should get some of the elements painted in orange. Not all of them, but some of them get painted in orange. And also get a list of the elements of the style. Now if we get back to the style designer, the style book and the style design, you can see that there are many controls with a structure. And again, this is how we can get to see the internal structure of the style elements. But what happens when we save a style or load a style? What happens when we embed a style in our component? Now let's look at the source code for this form, the XFM file. And here you can see the usual for Delphi developers, even for VCL developers, the usual streaming of a form. What does this file mean? This file means that when Delphi creates an object of the TFM styles form class, it will load this file and it will create the objects, will set some properties of the main object, but will also create sub-objects as listed here. So it will create a T-listbox object and name it listbox1, create a T-button object, and that's going to be button load style, create a second button, button to red, and so on, and load the properties of those buttons. Now, if we look at the style, we can see that there is an extremely similar architecture. Okay? And so a style is, again, some sort of streaming for the various objects. And it works in the same way. So in FireMonkey, when you create an object which is a button, possibly because it's loaded from a DFM file, it basically does the same operation again and say, hey, but a button is made of sub-objects which are saved in a stream. So the stream is loaded and the sub-objects are recreated. So yes, we say we want a button, but we end up with is rectangle, text, animations, and other sub-objects within a layout. Now this is not done exactly in that way because it will be too slow. So the first time you assign the style book, the style book gets parsed, and some objects are created in memory, which is a placeholder. They're not visible, but they are objects in memory. And then using some of the object cloning functions, these objects are moved to, well, it creates a clone and will place it in the UI and say that there's the button, the edit, and the other various controls. Okay, so you can see in this style that each element is a layout and has a style name, and this is what will be used for matching the various styles to the control that the styles have to be applied to. So that's the idea overall of how we can apply style to an existing control, but we can also dynamically create items based on a style. Let me show you this very traditional piece of code. Well, not traditional meaning VCL oriented, because you can create complex list box items in the VCL. But what we're doing here is creating a list box item for the list box, which is also the parent, set a height, and then I'm creating a text element, a t-text, and place it inside the list box item. List box item is the parent of the item text, and similarly create an image and places as item and places inside the list box item. The effect is something like this. We have the text and the image within our list box. Okay, but this could be done differently in a much more style-oriented way. What I'm doing here is creating, again, the listbox item, but rather than creating the sub-objects for the listbox item, I assign to the listbox items a given style, new style 1. Let's look at this style. Let's open the style book. Let's go search for new style 1. Here it goes. And you can see there is an image item on this side and a text item on this side. So the new style 1 style is made of an image and a text. And what we can do in the code is grab that text item and change the text item text and grab that image item and load a bitmap for actually a PNG file for the image item bitmap. And the effect is somehow similar. But this time, if we want to customize the specific position of these controls, we don't have to change the source code. We only have to change the style, which could be in a separate file. So we are actually gaining a lot of flexibility for our user interface compared to the hard-coded version that had positions and sizes of each of the user interface elements. And also we could add extra elements. You can have a checkbox. You can add a second graphical element, a border around the listbox items, whatever you want. You gain a lot of flexibility by basing that structure on a style. So we've seen how you can fine-tune the style of a given control, refer to primitive elements with find style resource. And these are all the steps of the Styles 101 demo that we have seen in the first part of this session. Now I wanted to add a little more about controls rendering. There are two branches under T control. So there are two families of controls in FireMonkey. There are primitives or shapes like image, paint box, rectangle, text. These controls have a paint function that actually does the painting, does the representation of the control itself. We can actually see a demo of how you can actually use some of these primitive controls to create a user interface. This is a rectangle, this is a second rectangle, this is another rectangle, and this is a path. So here are some graphical controls that create a specific effect, and you can see that there's basically no code in this application. And if I run it, I get this output. Now I could have obtained an extremely similar output just by painting on the surface of a form. In this case, however, there is a lot of code because there is all of the painting code, and there is less flexibility than just dropping control components and customizing their properties. But you can achieve it in the same effect in two different ways, by painting or by using these primitive shapes. However, there is a second family of controls. The T-shape class and its subclasses are the display primitive. They have fill and stroke settings, and each of the descendants overrides the paint function with some specific output. And as we have seen, you can paint on the canvas or use the primitive controls to create the same user interface. But there is a second completely different family of controls, which is T-style controls. They use styles to determine the control appearance. And as we've seen, they use style name to declare a style or style lookup to indicate which style they want to use. You can use find style resource to find a subcontrol, apply style to dynamically update or change the style. And there is a lot of behavior within these components that all share this common architecture. They don't have their own information. They don't, at times they don't even have their own storage for the text, because that's all tied to the style that they're using at a given moment. We can learn a little more about styles if we examine very shortly the difference between a style control, a custom style control, and a custom primitive control. I have a very simple package here that includes two controls. This is a shape, so it's a custom control with some painting, and the painting is two circles showing like a LED, an external surface which is always gray, and then if the LED is on, we paint the internal light with a given color. So it's all based on painting code, and it's more or less like, actually it's taken from a Delphi VCL T-graphic control. Now, what if we want to go for a style component, a style control? The behavior is completely different because we don't have painting. All we do when the user changes the status or the color is go grab an internal object that we are caching in this variable flat circle, and when we grab this LED, whenever the style change, when there is the apply style lookup virtual function is called, then at that point we go grab an object called LED if it is there and if it is a circle, and we use it as the object we're going to update in the UI. So then we're later going to either change its color or its status, turning it visible or non-visible, and use the status to turn it visible or not. Okay, it's a completely different approach. And again, if we look at this control, there's no painting and there's no internal structure. We don't know if there is only that circle or other elements that are part of the application. Now, if I go and install these controls, what I can do is grab the simple demo that uses the controls, and here are the two controls. They are very similar in their structure. This one has the colors and it's directly painting. This one has a similar structure, but that structure is actually not internal. It's based on the default style, and the default style is in this style layout. So what I could do here is really change significantly some of the features of the control in terms of graphic, in terms of structure. I could add animations, I could make it uneven, like it's not in the middle. And if I do apply and close, this is going to be our output in the running application. Okay, so you gain a lot of flexibility because it's the style that determines the look and feel of that individual control. And it's not hard-coded into the application or in painting code within the component itself. It's an external graphical structure that's applied to the control. There are a few changes to styles in FireMonkey, and I've already mentioned a couple. I've certainly mentioned the style settings and how you can either use the style to affect, like, for example, the font color of a label, or use the specific property, and you can decide which wins, if the style or the local property, by using the style settings. There are new pixel perfect styles. There's a new family of styles that are actually the default ones that change the internal architecture. Like, for example, buttons are not based on the same structure anymore, but they're based on some bitmaps, actually portions of a very large bitmap that comes with the style. To create a new bitmap style or pixel perfect style, what you can do is you can use the bitmap styles editor, which is shared with the VCL, and export an FMX style from that editor. At that point, you can load the new style. And the style is going to use the tsubimage component heavily, because this tsubimage is the component that will let you grab a portion of a very large image and use it for painting an individual element. Okay, so just a couple of things in terms of demo. I've created a version of the 101 styles application that is based on the standard style, the one that comes with the product. Okay, here actually I need to load one of the local, like, customizations to have the proper behavior. Okay, the custom styles. I've loaded them from a separate external file that has this information. But now if we look to the, for example, we want to edit the custom style of this button, we can see that the structure is different. There is only a background, animations, and text. It's not the same structure as we had before, and also there's slight misalignment of these entries as well, of these items. So we have a different structure for our style and for our button, and this happens significantly. I mean, the internal structure using these new bitmap styles is different than the standard or average structure of styles in the first version of FireMonkey, or even today for some of the existing styles. The advantage of this pixel perfect bitmap is that they can mimic the individual platforms much more closely. Again, if you're interested into these styles, you can open the bitmap style designer. And for example, what you can do, you can open a graphical style, like for example, cyan dusk. And again, this is based on a very big image, plus fonts, colors, and definition of the structure of a number of objects. And what we can do here, we can save as a FireMonkey style. Okay, so we'll call it my new style.style. And now we can take this graphical style and load it within our application. Let's go for documents, public, Grad Studio, styles, and I saved it here, my new style, and then we can apply and close, and we can see the look and feel of this application with the new style that's based on that large bitmap, which is going to be embedded in memory inside our application. So it's a significantly different way of implementing styles, but it's still within the boundary of the styles architecture that FireMonkey provides. If we want, it's a slightly more hybrid architecture than the original vector-based styles, but it's a very effective architecture. Yeah, it could be seen as a compromise, but it's a positive compromise because it lets you get the advantage of both approaches and work either with one or the other or the two combined. So this is what I wanted to show you in terms of styles in FireMonkey. Of course, there are details that I've skipped. There are actually a lot of details at the lower levels, as there are some more complexity in terms of creating components that I've shown at very simple components demo. My goal here was only to let you understand how styles work in FireMonkey and how they constitute the real foundation of the library. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me right after this recording ends. If you are listening to the live CodeRage 7 event, if not, feel free to send me email at marcocantu@gmail.com.
Okay, yep. Thanks to you all for attending.
Let's see, Gordon says, congratulations, Marco, on your new position.
Thanks.
Then there's a question by Brian Long. Which editor font are you using? It's very readable.
It's a proprietary editor font. It's called, I have to check out the name. I think I blogged about it. If you search for editor font on my blog, I can probably do it myself. And it's done by the same person that does the covers for my books. He's actually a font designer. I think I like it a lot. Yeah, I agree. It's very readable, but I think it's about €100. It's not cheap.
Okay. And you now have access, Marco, as an organizer to the Q&A log. So
okay.
You can type in answers if you want, or just see them and I'll ask them. In a few of my Delphi, Alf is asking, in a few of my Delphi applications, I use binary tree container to store lots of objects for very fast access using TurboPower Sysudel's TS tree. which is possibly not easily transferred to FireMonkey and Apple. I'm not sure about. I mean, there's whole sorts of stuff in open source. All the Turbo Power things, Turbo Async Pro, for example, connects through Windows COM interfaces for serial ports. There's not a Macintosh equivalent, but go ahead, Marco.
Yeah, on that technical kind of low-level side, it's not trivial to write code that goes across platforms. There are significant differences. And there are areas that are considered relevant, like the sensors. There are actually two sensors component in FireMonkey and XC3, where there is like specific investment in terms of the framework itself. It's course it's open, so people can plug in their own extra components, but it's not trivial. I mean, most of the times you have to call native APIs that are completely different, and at times you don't have those API, like mobile tools don't have the same kind of physical hardware of an extra. Well, actually, they have more physical devices connected, more physical elements, more interaction with the real world, with compass, with gyroscopes, with GPS, whatever. But they don't have serial ports. There are things that are completely different.
Yeah, and again, some of these components use Windows things. I'm not sure if the tree from sysutils is using some underlying Windows Common Control or not. So you really need to take a look at that and see, or maybe the people working on updating Turbo Power open source tool sets, some of them are non-visual controls that can just be used directly, even if they're tied to Windows, then it would mean your FireMonkey application will be tied to Windows. But you can take a look at the source code and see what's going on in there. And maybe some people will join the open source project of the Turbo Power tools to create FireMonkey versions.
Oh yeah, I'd certainly encourage that. In fact, I'm actually, one of the things I would be interesting is to try to help leverage all of the open source development that's done in Delphi out there. It was just a blog post minutes ago about that. I think it should be relevant to kind of have some sort of coordination, aggregation, whatever. I mean, just knowing what's going on, because there are lots of very nice Delphi open source projects that the majority of the customers is not aware of, and actually even probably Embarcadero is not aware of, and I'm not aware of for sure. So that's a part of the community. It's relevant part. The product needs help from the community. That's for sure.
There was a question here about how can I make a style to show substrings in another color, e.g. to do like incremental search in a list box or string grid and show the results visually. This worked before. He's talking about it in VCL. I'm not sure.
I think what you do in FireMonkey, you can create, like in the 101 demo, what you can do, you can pre-create multiple styles. Like, for example, if you have list box items and you want some of them different in terms of color and features, you pre-create different styles. You can have the highlighted version of that control, the blue, the green, the red, whatever. I'm using color names, but it should be like more than color. And then dynamically, you apply the different styles of the different elements depending on the current status. As an example, suppose you're doing a data entry form and you have your labels and you want the labels that have invalid input be turned red, which is a very common thing to do, and maybe the edit to be like highlighted or have a shadow. Now, of course, you can do it in code, no big deal, but you can also do it in style. Say, hey, this is the style error label, the style error edit, and so you separate the application logic. This control has an error condition from the user interface. It's red, it's green, it's highlighted, it's whatever. Because the user interface might change depending on the platform, might change depending on you find a new designer that changes all of the color of your application, and that color has to follow. And this is exactly what you do in Cascade Style Sheet. You don't hard code in HTML that item should be red. You change the style, you put it to highlighted style, and then the style, which is done by a graphic designer, shows it has to be red. So that separation is relevant, and styles permit the separation. It's not compulsory. You can go kind of low level, traditional VCL way of code, change the color, but styles provide more flexibility, more separation of application logic to UI.
And you can create, you can dynamically do anything in code. You can apply a style, create a style.
Sure. Yeah, you can also create a style dynamically.
Create a style dynamically.
You can do whatever you want, but then thinking in terms of styles helps improving the application architecture of FireMonkey. It's relevant. It's not compulsory, but it's relevant. It changes things. And again, the day you'll be able to port your code like to iOS, to Android, you probably won't want to use the same colors, the same graphical elements, but the same application logic. So if you're using styles, your code will move over. If you're not, it will be a lot of rewriting to do.
Yeah. Brian is asking, why does he says DFM, but it's really for FireMonkey in this case. But it's relevant for any form, actually, depending on what you do at design time. In this case, he's saying, why does the form in its storage show 17 zeros after the decimal for all floating point numbers? Seems like a terrible waste of space.
I feel exactly the same. It's been 2 days in the job. I haven't asked why it is so. I will ask, and then hope maybe there is a specific answer that I'm not aware of. But I think it doesn't make much sense.
It's just the streaming that's coming out of the form design.
It's a waste. It increases your executable size, and that's not nice. It's not by far, but it increases executable size, and it's very confusing visually. Of course, when you look at it. It's not a big deal, but still it's confusing.
When you look at the form as text?
Yeah, when you look at the form as text, it looks like, that's what all of that stuff there is.
But when it's a form file and when it's loaded into memory, right?
When it's loaded in memory, it's identical.
A floating point. Then it's a floating point, right?
But when it's saved to the DFM, which is compiled into the executable through resources, that weighs just a couple of extra bytes. Nothing big, but I know I'll figure out.
I should also say that if you load other things at design time, load big bitmaps, load big 3D models, like you could have a form file that could blow up to many megabytes, and that sometimes you might decide to realize that this is going on when you see the size of your form file in your executable, and simply as part of form create, load those kinds of things from resources or from external files at runtime.
Again, it's not a big deal. Those zeros. It's just slightly annoying, and it might be possible to kind of change it a bit. It's not a relevant issue, but it's something that kind of bothers me when I started using FireMonkey. So I fully understand it looks odd.
I love all those zeros, but that's just me. Again, it's the same at DFM. If you load, not specifically for floating point, which of course there's floating point all over because of the coordinate systems in FireMonkey apps. Let's see. How can you make a control position property to correspond to the center of the control instead of its top left corner, like in 3D controls, where the position is the center of 3D, because you have to have something. You have to pick a point in space. 2D controls use top left.
Yeah, that's what they do, and I can understand the need for that, but I think it's very common. Throughout most libraries out there, 2D like VCL, but also other third-party libraries. Most of the times, the reference is the top left corner,
and also on the platforms.
Yeah, that's what generally happens. So. Yeah, and I see the need for an alternative option, and there are things that are not specific to the position. You can change, like for example, you can pick the rotation center when you rotate a control. If you want to rotate a control around its center, you put in the rotation position 0.5, which is half of size of the control, and 0.5 in the vertical axis, and so you're rotating around the control center. And the other thing that is relevant is try not to think too much in terms of absolute position, because there is scaling, there is rotation, there are a lot of things around that. Position is kind of more relative than kind of an absolute value as is used to be in the VCL world.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing is, I guess you could always decide to create your own coordinate system. And again, on form create, you could organize.
Yeah, but it's a lot
do all
of
your
work,
do all your
and
transformations.
I know personally, I don't see the need for that.
Yep.
Maybe I'm just missing it.
I'm just saying, if for some reason, if the person wanted to create their own coordinate system, you could do all your transforms and so on yourself. But again, if you look at all the platforms that have 2D, usually you'll find top and left. I don't know of one that doesn't. And of course, you could also have a 3D application where you put other kinds of controls in. You can have a 2D application of FireMonkey that has a 3D viewport. So lots of things there. If I install Delphi XE, this is an HTML5.
Yeah, it's more.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. Okay. Any word on FireMonkey? Oh, here's this FireMonkey book.
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I as I mentioned yesterday, I have one that's half written. I have to wait a few weeks to figure out how my time is arranged. I mean, personal compared to work time. And I'll figure out what to do. I certainly want to get that information out, either finding help or using some of my weekends. Or just decided that I can get out a partial book rather than a complete one, whatever. But I need a few weeks to kind of figure out things.
Okay, stay tuned, everyone.
Yeah, and for Lance, yes, it is Pragmata Pro. Sorry, I was...
Okay.
Fabrizio will hate me for that, but he's not listening.
Isn't he?
Yeah, he's the designer of my book covers, but his real job is being a font designer. And he's done some marvelous fonts, but it's kind of a tough business to be.
Oh, the font business?
Lots of piracy. I mean, huge amount of piracy, much more than software.
Let's see. Oh, Alpha's mentioning there's a lot of inline assembly code in TS tree. So anyway, take a look at it. Maybe there's some things you can do, Alpha, or encourage others to get in there and do some stuff. Very nice presentation, much clearer now, but I got lost in the style designer before, so could that happen again? Is the source code available? Because perhaps it'll give me more time to look at it.
I'll make the source code available, it's promised. I just have to squeeze in some time, but I'll blog probably tomorrow after I've done my sessions, and then provide links to the source code.
Okay. And that's the same thing. Example, let's see. It says, maybe a bit off topic, OT, but as you are an accomplished author, will you also play an active part in documentation and the wiki?
It won't be my primary focus right now, because I have a couple of other things that are relevant to do. I'll try to help out, but again, it's documentation is different than book writing in terms of tone and style, and for many things. I think it would be more relevant to be able to get out, and not just by myself, I mean, also through others, to get out lots of material on that. I mean, books that are in the books format along with the documentation. But I'll try to see what can be done also in the documentation.
And as product manager and owner of the business of Delphi, then your encouragement of the R&D team and the documentation team all doing what they can to improve the quality is a cheerleading role and an important factor.
Yeah, but that's different than writing it myself. That's not.
What I do is I find stuff and I drill down stuff. When I was doing the Getting Started course, I just gave them back everything. I said, here's a whole chapter. You want to put it in, or here's what I had to do by enhancing the doc pages. So, and in fact, everyone can go into the doc wiki, and there's a way to add your comments about things that you want to see on a page and add some text and so on. So we encourage everybody to, when you find something, either report a problem with the URL into Quality Central for doc, or go in there and type comments.
Yeah, that's very relevant.
Yeah. Delphi needs a Boost-style sandbox to develop tools and components that get added to the next release of the product. Well, there are some things like Fast Code, the Fast Code project. Things get brought in. There was other work going on. Basically, Boost is a C++ set of libraries and functions that many of which are test beds and many of them have been moved into the C++11 standard runtime library and into the standard itself. So, maybe Martin, you want to collaborate with others in the Delphi community and with Marco to see about creating a sort of community. Again, Fast Code Project was one area.
And I think that going forward, I mean, some of the relevant things it's important to bring them in the product and make it part of the tool set that people get. But it's not that everything good has to be in the product. I mean, there are valuable open source projects out there that are not in the product, and I don't think they're unlikely to get brought in the product. But still, I mean, they are relevant, and so again, there might be ways to improve the relationship and make it more obvious for all the Delphi users of what is available in terms of third-party paid tools and third-party open source.
Inline code. I was going back to this inline assembly thing with Alf. Some of that, like 64-bit, for example, one of the requirements is if you have assembler code, it has to be in a separate method. You can't have inline assembler and Delphi code in 64-bit Delphi compiler. So there's already things that are going to have to be dealt with when you're looking at things like inline code and migration forward. And also, as we go to other chips, when we go to ARM processor, you're going to have to if-def assembler code because not all processes are going to be Intel.
If you want to move Delphi 64-bit, I mean, right. Delphi 64-bit is not the same as Intel 32-bit in terms of low level.
Let's see. Oh, Ralph is again asking, because not everybody was on the opening product address yesterday. Congratulate on your new position. What is your new position exactly? P.S. Have some of your books.
The new position is Delphi Product Manager.
So here at Embarcadero, the product manager is responsible for the product business, for the product user stories, specifications, features, capabilities, and moving the product forward. And then there's program managers in R&D who make sure that a specific release of the product get built, and there's engineers, and there's quality managers, the field test managers, and so on. So the product manager, Marco owns the business.
Yep.
Is to collaborate with all the other people and the community and customers to define future releases of the product, provide the user stories, pick release points, what features need to be in to drive the business and to satisfy customer needs and requirements, and then to work with the rest of the teams in the company to make sure we deliver products on it.
There is a product management team. It's not like a single standalone position, one-man job, one-man show, but of course there is some specific responsibility to each of us.
Victory is mentioning that there's already a good FireMonkey book, and he has kugara.com/book list. So I added that link.
Yeah, I haven't read it, but I've seen that link.
Yeah, Bob Swart also has books. He's got a Delphi Starter that has some FireMonkey book, exe2 and exe3. He's got a FM1 iOS book that he put out.
Yeah,
which is based on the Free Pascal thing.
There's quite a few things going on. So if I can get my stuff out, fine. But it's not that is the only source of information, and that's certainly positive.
Let's see. And again, I think Rick, you were asking about his immediate focus for Delphi product. You talked a little about some of the things that you're going to try to focus on.
One of the initial things is given that there is a roadmap and there is development that's been ongoing for some time around the mobile platforms, which I'm getting involved into, but it's not that there is anything big to decide in that area. My initial focus is going to be on the enterprise side. So anything from database to multi-tier to cloud to, that area of the product that is there. It's significant, but it hasn't received a lot of attention over the last few years. So it's good to kind of focus on data connectivity kind of in general for the product. Of course, for the product as it is, the Windows one, but also for the product in its new form of mobile development product.
Okay, but also responsible for the whole product business of Delphi. Yep. Dan's saying, I use Indy products inside Delphi, very happy with how it works, but like every time the Delphi version is far older than actual versions, bug solved, Indy. So I guess one of the things is Indy is bundled into the product. It's not built by R&D, although we rely on some of the components. Marco is the person who owns the product and defining what's in the product. Some of those challenges have to do with synchronizing updates and what gets into each release in working with R&D.
Yeah, that's this. I mean, from the external point of view, I was into. It is an issue, and it's not only for Indy. There are other areas of the product that would require more kind of continuous updates, but it's not an easy task to it's not something easy to do. So, well, I'll try to use this input. I know it's relevant, but ultimately, if you want to have kind of all of the latest third-party or open source stuff updated up to the very last minute, you'll have to resort to using the directly the version that they make available.
But ultimately, again, just as you were talking about encouraging open source projects, helping provide information for people, the Project Indy team is, they're in a sense on the inside. They know what we're doing with development because we rely on it. For example, some of the Indy components in DataSnap.
Yeah, there are
dependencies.
Yeah,
already.
They're not just added to the product like on a side. They're really used in the product heavily. So any change will have to be kind of retested significantly. DataSnap relies heavily on Indy, and many other parts of the product rely significantly on Indy. So a change there is not something you can just throw into the product without thinking. But I know it's an open issue. So
yeah, we also have this just for everyone's sake. With all our technology partners, there are tens of thousands of components and tools for supporting Delphi, C++ Builder, Rad Studio, HTML5 Builder. And, in developer relations, we're responsible for that relationship with all those technology partners and trying to synchronize them all. We give them as much information and help as possible. We give them early briefings. We give them advice. We give them early test builds, all those kinds of things just to make sure. But ultimately, it's their business. People ask, well, what about DevExpress, FireMonkey components, Quantum Grid, whatever? We give all the information to DevExpress, but again, it's their business. And just as TMS, it's their business and so on, and fast reports and such, and how they release. What you can do is if you rely on those projects, if you rely on those tools and components, if you rely on some open source, is encourage people involved in those projects and those products, contact them, talk to them.
Yeah.
And if you need help from us, let us know, and we will help them.